Hey y'all, hope you're doing good today. So I have ran out to get some coffee and pick up a couple of things at the store, and I'm very strategic about where I'm going because being the day before Thanksgiving, it's if you haven't left the house, let me just tell you, it's as crazy as you can imagine. So I'm going to try to avoid the majority of the chaos out there. So that's my plan. But I'm having just a laid back and relaxing coffee break and wanted to spend that time with you all. So I hope you're doing good. So I've been thinking more about my channel and you know, why I'm doing this, and I know why. And it's simply, I've shared with you all before, because once you go through some crazy things, you can reflect back on a time during all of this craziness that you were very confused, and maybe you even were lucky enough to have found other people that explained things to you and helped you. And I just want to be able to offer that to others and pay that back. And so, and I just feel called to do so. And as far as defining exactly the specifics of what I'm doing, because I'm not a professional or a licensed therapist or anything like that, I really kind of personally, this is no judgment toward anyone else, but just personally, I don't like using very popular terms so much as narcissism, even though it helps us to understand what we're talking about. But also being a part, I was going to say, of a spiritual community, which when you're in the body of Christ you are, but ultimately when you're a spiritual person, you understand that the spiritual realm is influencing our physical reality at all times. And so it's kind of like you can't just look at one element without the other. You have to put them together. And in doing so, my approach is to view all of the things that we struggle with that are extremely negatively impactful in our lives, even just within our own selves as well as relationally with other people. I view all of that as just a spiritual battle between good and evil. And so if I had to really define my channel, and I'm going to probably, I've updated my description, I may update even the title or the name of my channel to reflect this as well. But I would say it's about the nature of evil, or understanding evil, right? And so, and healing from, obviously. And so I want to talk about that today, just because it's really on my heart and mind. God reminded me of a Bible verse the other day, and I don't even know why. It just came out of the blue. And I'm still trying to get well, so my voice is going to sound probably very weak and different to you all, and I'm sorry ahead of time. I'm realizing it's kind of hard to talk, but this just came out of the blue, literally out of the blue. And so I wasn't, fishing for it, praying for it, looking for it. It just came out of nowhere. And I feel like sometimes people can describe that as like a download. Sometimes that feels very much sent to us on purpose, and that's how I feel about this verse. But the verse was in the Bible where it talks about that if your right hand offends you, and this is all symbolic, if you're new to the Bible, the Christian Bible, if your right hand offends you, you're supposed to cut it off. And I need to look up the verse, and I'll drop it in the description here. But if I'm not mistaken, and whether this is exactly right or not, it's still a good topic of discussion. So I'm going to go ahead and recall it from memory. Even if it's wrong, it's going to benefit us for discussion purposes, right? But if you don't cut the right hand off, then it can cause you to sin. That's the consequence, is that it can cause you to sin. And I want to talk about this in probably a different way, from a different perspective, or coming at it from a different angle, using a different lens, okay? And that is, first of all, I've shared this book with you all before, and I still have not read this cover to cover. I flipped through it because I'm just so busy right now, this season of my life. I haven't had time to just sit down and read a book cover to cover, but it's a really cool book. And it, the subtitle, and I don't know how to say this, Watigo maybe, but the subtitle is Healing the Mind Virus That Plagues Our World. And that's how I view evil. It's just another lens to view evil, okay, this book. And I so appreciate that this book was written, because it's simply helping people to become aware of it. And Jesus was saying, in his prayer, there at the very end of his life, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. And there's other verses that talk about, wisdom is the principal thing, and with all you're getting, get understanding. And my people perish for a lack of knowledge. So understanding, and I would say becoming conscious, is super, super important to avoid the traps of evil. And that's just it. Evil is, I want to say the word pregnant for whatever reason, but it's just full of traps. That's just the very nature of it. And that's illustrated very interestingly in the movie The Devil's Advocate with Keanu Reeves and Charlize Theron. It's a really, really powerful movie if you haven't seen it. But the devil's played by Al Pacino. And he does a great job of showing how easy it is for us to be deceived. And we're warned so many times in the Bible to not be deceived. And one of the easiest ways is to get wrapped up in ego inflation, or what's called just arrogance and haughtiness and self-righteousness, thinking that we've got it all figured out and other people don't. And that's very dangerous. And so, and yet, when I was younger, I can look back and I remember thinking, like, I'm just a really good person. I really genuinely felt like, I knew right from wrong. And, I had a really hard time with what the Bible describes and defines as, I don't know if this is right, original sin, but it's like, we're all born into this, and it's like the whole debate of being sinful from the time you're born or whatever. But there's also the age of accountability when a person becomes conscious. And I think that's really, this is just my opinion, clearly. I'm no Bible scholar by any means or expert, but I think that's when God really, he knows our heart. People can pretend and hide from other people in the world, but God knows the heart. And he knows when a person knows if they're doing wrong or right. And that, to me, is when it's genuinely considered sin, okay, because it's a conscious thing. But, again, Jesus, was saying at the end of his life there, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. You might just go up further and look at everything from a bird's eye view and consider, like, even if a person knows what they're doing and they choose to do wrong or evil, okay, if they really knew even the unknowable things, like the mysteries of God, the greater reality and existence and all this, then we could say there's no way that they would even choose to do evil. And so that's, I think even if a person knows what they're doing, if what they're doing is wrong, you could even elevate higher and say, do they really, really know, the consequences? But that's just really digging deep and just going off on a tangent, and we don't have to go there. But what I want to talk about is the elusive nature of evil, and how evil not only gets us to judge other people, but it gets us to judge ourselves. And this can be experienced directly within interpersonal relationships. And it's something that people who call them, I don't know, psychopaths, sociopaths, narcissists, whatever, people who just enjoy playing mind games, that's a really strange thing to me. Sometimes when something's such a foreign concept to you, it can take you many, many years or decades to even become aware of it, because your own mind doesn't work that way. But there are people who just enjoy playing mind games. And I think that the malignancy, if if that's even a word, of evil is on such a huge, broad spectrum of, it's all bad, but it's like not all that bad, worse, even more worse, and horrible, extremely bad. So it's all a spectrum. But I think that on the lower end of things, which is still bad, because it still has great impacts on other people, the genuine victims, right? But there are people who just enjoy playing mind games. And, this is experienced for us a lot of times for the first time in school, when you witness a bully and how they treat another person and how they mess with them, and pick on them and confuse them, and they think it's funny, and this other person's gullible. I'm thinking of like Urkel, from the sitcom, was it in the 80s or early 90s, where he was just oblivious. Okay, people who were just not only naive, they're just so naive, they're oblivious. And there are people who, have fun with that, and they lead people on, and they deceive people, and they get a kickback, and they kick back and laugh rather, and it's just entertainment for them and stuff. That's cruel. That would be on that spectrum of evil, and that's very cruel. And a lot of people, I think, don't think that's evil. And it's, that's fine, to each their own, but to me it is. And because the impacts of the person that's oblivious, at some point, if and when they become conscious of all this, it can totally shatter their perception of the world, their reality, and that can have a great negative impact on their mind. And your mind can break, and it can even have them reflecting on their own self-worth, because they may be thinking, well, am I just really that stupid and gullible? And it's just, and I know some of this from experience and some of this from observation, different things I've seen and experienced in life. But the effects of evil are to me, just, that's what we need to focus on, and that's what needs to drive our desire for discernment. It's not to judge other people. It's not to be able to compare and elevate ourselves as being better than someone else. It's not even about that. It's just about discerning for the purpose of not falling into these traps of evil. And so another thing I want to talk about is this. People who are overtly cruel, a lot of times they're called overt narcissists. You can just kind of tell. They're just, there's no, it's almost like these people are just coping with this really poor behavior of not filtering themselves when they're interacting with others, and they're not concerned about being respectful or anything. I'm going to share this. I mean, to me, there's a little bit of, I hate to go so far as to say appreciation on my part, but to me, at least with those kind of people, what you see is what you get, and there's not a whole lot of deception there. It's just maybe these people are very unpleasant, and then you can choose to not have anything to do with them, to avoid them, So that's one thing. But you have in the Bible, and those people can be very cruel, very, very cruel, but they're not hiding it. To me, it's all about the hidden part, the deception part of it that makes evil just even more evil, okay? It brings it on down on the spectrum of evil into like a bigger deal. And so here we have, I've used this example recently. Here's this wolf, and it's cloaked in this sheep's clothing. And this is deception. This is representative of deception. Now let's pretend for a minute like this this represents an innocent person, okay, who the wolf is seeking to deceive and exploit and destroy, or whatever. Let's say that this person has learned about evil, and they can see that this wolf is a wolf. They see the sheep's clothing too, but they see that it's truly a wolf. This innocent person may respond to this person who's evil, but it's not overt, okay? in a very, I don't know, you may say harsh manner. Maybe they don't. Maybe they just implement strong boundaries. They don't have a lot to do with this person or whatever it is. And this is something that we need to understand is within our agency. Okay? Now, children, that's a little more difficult if it's a familial dynamic, because children, obviously can't just leave the house and go, buy their own place and get out of the situation, which is really sad. But and I think that's where a lot of our unhealthy coping mechanisms develop, is in childhood. But this little person, let's say that this is not a child, they see the wolf for who it is. They're not fooled or deceived by the sheep's clothing. And now you have everybody else out here in the world, even people who may be close to this person. Well, when they see that this person, which may be you, okay, is not having a lot to do with this person, or even is reacting harshly to this person, but all they see is the sheep's clothing, they don't see the wolf, they think this is the person right here, then you're going to be viewed as a bad guy. And I say this because you just have to get to a point, and that if you let that affect you, it can make you question your discernment, and then that can put you in danger. Okay? So, there's a lot of different ways we can look at this. Again, that Bible verse, if your right hand causes you to stumble or to sin, you should cut it off. If your true nature is one of goodness, but when you're around another person who is very triggering to you, and you have a hard time responding from a place of love, and it kind of takes you out of character when I say character even though you're not acting, but it takes you out of your natural state, then something's wrong. Something's wrong. And I think early on in our awareness journey, we can blame ourselves. And that's great. That's great. Somebody all caught up in evil and having fun with it is going to love that. And that comes into, terms like reactive abuse. Because what that can do, if a person knows how to trigger you enough, you can feel guilty about how you reacted. Other people can look at you and be like, wow, did you hear what he or she said? That's terrible. Or, whatever it is. So then you're caught up. Now you're caught up in it, and you feel bad about it, and you question yourself. And but that can kind of be early on in your journey. At some point, you're going to see things for how they are. And because unfortunately some people trigger you on purpose or try to, okay? And you can get to a point where, you don't react anymore. You kind of see it for what it is, but you may want to distance yourself. And even then you can be judged for that too. But you have to get to a point where people can think whatever they want to think about you, and it just really doesn't matter. The Bible explains we're not here to be people pleasers and to answer to other people. It's all about our connection with God and pleasing Him and trying to live right by Him. And I just wanted to encourage you to be strong in that manner. And then in this book, I'll share this with you. This is a section on page 206 called Looking Glass into the World's Soul. And down towards the bottom of this page, it says, interestingly, the book of Revelation talks about a war in heaven. It has that in quotes, a war in heaven. The events portrayed in the Bible can be looked at as symbolically encrypted utterances of the soul, pointing to transcendental realities. The war in heaven is symbolically representing a living dynamism, that's what it says, that is taking place within the collective unconscious of humanity. As long as its inner source is not recognized, because again, the greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist, right? Okay. As long as its inner source is not recognized, however, this split in the psyche is then projected outside of ourselves, appearing in the form of a metaphysical split between the powers of light and the powers of darkness. If indeed the kingdom of heaven is within us, which the Bible says the kingdom of heaven is within, okay? It says, so too is the war in heaven. Something to think about, okay? And then he quotes someone, and I'll drop the name in here. I don't know how to pronounce it. Berdyaev. It says, God and the devil are at war within the human heart. When we are not able to contain the warring elements within our own self, this conflict of opposites spills out into the outside world, where it gets acted out or dreamed up in the world theater by way of projection. Most people have their attention drawn to the outer conflict, not the conflict within. Before humanity can truly evolve and ascend to love and light, we need to come to terms with the warring elements within ourselves. And that's, that's not to discredit or dismiss or minimize evil evil as being real externally, okay? But ultimately you have to look at where you have control. I'm going back to Stephen Covey's 4 quadrants. No, I'm sorry. That's a really great thing to read too, his 4 quadrants, which helps you with your priorities in life. But also, and he's a great author too, Stephen Covey, but he talks about your circle of concern, okay? And you can research that online. But the point here is to understand what's within your control and what's not. And that's the key. If you can find that within a situation where you detect your discernment is raising a flag and saying there's evil here, okay, and you're trying to figure it out and all this, or maybe you have it figured out, I don't know, whether you do or not. If you can just learn to detach, and that's important, so you can think clearly, because evil likes to keep us in the dark, confused, okay? Then find this key element, which is, where do you have control? Where do you have agency? And when you find that, it's your ticket to freedom. And it's the difference in, it's so important because it's the difference in resigning yourself to a state of hopelessness, which is just going to have a snowball effect, okay? And you're just going to feel like you're just flying downhill with that snowball effect, okay? And it's just, everything is going to feel worse and worse to you. You can really get caught up in it. And it can have a detrimental effect on your body too. Not just your mind and heart, but your body, which responds, I think, to our mind and heart. There's a big, big difference there between that, being super hopeless, and saving yourself. And more so, even than that, saving your soul. Because when you remove yourself, when you find how you can remove yourself, in what way you can remove yourself, the details of all this, when you figure all this out, at that point, you're not even going to be in the vicinity of the traps that evil sets. Okay? Where you're even tempted to stumble, where you're even tempted to respond from a place that's not love, and then you feel, bad about it later. You see what I'm saying? So that's the little nuance that I have learned to find in every situation, because here's the thing, in my experience and in my observations, evil loves to manufacture, to create situations that, we don't see immediately as traps. And because we don't see them immediately as traps, that takes time. They take away that element of time by putting pressure on us. Okay? This is where actually those 4 quadrants from Stephen Covey really can help you. Okay? Like, evil operating through another person can make you think, and they can hook you through your empathy or something like, hey, I need help with something or whatever. And they can be like, but I need it now. I need it now. They can make you feel like something is an emergency. And you that's hooking you in, okay, via your empathy. They're taking away your what's the word I want to use? Faculty, that's not it. The element of time, which you need to be able to discern and think clearly, by putting pressure on you, okay, like, well, I gotta know something, like, if someone's wanting, your input on a decision, I really gotta know something soon, or, it's whatever it is. Just kind of learn these tactics. I would just encourage you to observe, not just in the present moment, but look back, in time and in your own memories, and as an observer, and evaluate all these situations that you found yourself in where you wound up feeling like you didn't respond from your true nature and it just went sour, or you found yourself in a situation that you like, how did I get there? Why did I say that? Why did I agree to that? Or whatever it is. You can start to see these tactics that evil uses, okay? But it'll really help you too, because you can start to, it's kind of like when you see this, all these bad situations in the past, sorry about that. So all these bad situations in the past, when you start to understand these tactics, then you understand, the dynamic that played out. And that helps so much, because it's kind of like you're able to rewrite your perception of things, and that frees you up from judgment, because you did the best you could. You're like, wait a minute, now, maybe you have time. Whereas back then, all these situations, you were put under so much pressure, you didn't have time. You realize, like, hey, I really did do the best I could under those circumstances, or, react the best I could, or respond the best I could, or whatever it was, make the best decision I could under those circumstances, okay? But so much is manufactured, both for evil to get its way, okay, and also for you to get wrapped up in evil itself by responding from sometimes anger, or maybe you don't respond from anger. Maybe you respond from a good place, but it's detrimental or bad for you in some way, or you or your family in some way, and then you blame yourself, and you're like, why did I agree to this or that, And you can start to pick apart too, if you really think about things, like, okay, here's what I actually said. And sometimes evil, when it's operating through another person, okay, a tactic can be that this person can repeat back to you what you said in a slightly different way, and then that gets registered because they want that to be the truth, but it was actually a very cunning form of manipulation, okay? And then you think that you agreed to this because it was very similar to what you said, but really, if your memory is good enough to recall, you can recognize the subtle shift of how this person did just a little manipulation there, and that changed the trajectory of the whole situation. Think about that. Think about just an angle, okay? A slight angle, and then if you go down the road, it becomes bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and so it's that important, is what I'm saying. And it's awful, because you don't want to come into this awareness and grow your discernment over time and get to where you're skeptical of everything and everyone, but I think it's just we have to learn. We just have to get used to this new gift. It really is a gift. The Bible describes it as a gift of discernment from the Holy Spirit. We have to learn how to really use it properly. But just I would just encourage you to try and define best you can, these observable and or experienced pitfalls or traps of evil. They're very cunning, they're very subtle sometimes, but they can have great impacts on you and others. And it can be all within yourself, it can be within you and another person, or even a group, the world. Those are more obvious, but to me, this is just me, evil that is hidden, that is cloaked, as described in the Bible as wolves in sheep's clothing, that is the worst kind. Okay? But it is a spectrum. And even to me, if you look at the impacts that even just playing mind games with a person has on that person, that those impacts are huge. And that's what motivates me. I've experienced some crazy stuff in my life. It's it's like movie script, like big stuff. And I've known people who have experienced wild stuff, and there have been people who didn't make it, and that's extremely sad. And so that's why I'm motivated. And ultimately, discernment is not something that we can give one another. Again, it's a gift from the Holy Spirit. We can't go around that. We can't going through a back door, as they say, or whatever. It's you gotta, and that was something I had to learn firsthand too. It's not textbook. It's just not, because really that feeds the ego. As long as we think that we can figure it all out by ourselves and leave God out of the equation, all that is, it's just another trap. It's just another trap, or what they call an ego trap. And so, the submission to God part, and genuinely wanting that relationship is the foundation. To me. Well, I believe it is. Not just to me. I believe it is. Firmly. And so discernment has to be a gift. Now from there, I think the learning part of it, I think sharing with one another, we can really help one another to refine our discernment, or what the Bible calls iron sharpening iron. That's what we can do for one another. And we can also support one another and encourage one another, because it's all around us, as you know. But I think that it's important to commit, and it takes a commitment too, to not just rise above, but stay above all this negative stuff. Work on that vibration, that energy, the type of energy. So I think that that's just, something that we can do. And when we can meet one another there, or maybe, one of us is here, one of us is here, we can be like, hey, remember this and remember that, and we can help one another rise together. That's just so important. It's so important, and we're supposed to do that and to help one another. And I hope that in some way, all that I share is beneficial to you, is helpful to you. And if so, then I feel really good about that, and I'm very, very grateful that you're even here at all. And I know you can't hardly see me now with the sun reflecting, but it's kind of cool though, isn't it? Pretty. Okay, so that's it for today. I'll be back again soon. I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you feel called to share them in the comments, that would be great. And just thank you so much for coming along to hear the message. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and I'll see you again very soon.